we should move ahead. We have a number of the political leaders from the state who have asked to have an opportunity to make a few comments or to provide letters or videotapes. And we've had some input from leaders of the other places we've been. We've had a lot of mail contacts on the Hill. And so I'd like to begin that session. We're going to overrun about 30 minutes or 20 minutes here for lunchtime. I hope that's not a problem for anyone. I'd like to begin, because he's here in the room with us, I understand, with Lieutenant Governor Kottkamp, who has asked to make a few comments to the committee and to this group. Lieutenant Governor, please, would you care to come up? Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak with you this morning on behalf of Governor Christ and the citizens of the state of Florida. And I also want to thank you and each of the members of this committee for your service to the citizens of this country. This is important work. Our nation's past successes in the space program helped define our country as the world leader in innovation for the past 5 decades. The level of our commitment to space exploration in the future and the development of technology to support that exploration will define our country's standing in the innovation economy for the next 5 decades. It seems fitting that we gather this week right here in the state where the genius and courage of mankind literally launched Americans from NASA's John F. Kennedy Space Center on a mission to the moon, which shaped the future of space exploration, not just for this country, but for the world. Florida has been the center of gravity for our nation's space launch program for NASA for those 50 years, when space exploration sparked the imaginations of generations, inspiring the nation and the world, and all of us in this room. This inspiration continues today as we await the return of STS-127 tomorrow morning. We all know the benefits of America's space program are numerous and have led to inspired advances in science and technology, including the fields of medicine, transportation, public safety, environmental preservation. Today, there are more than 3,000 products that we use in our daily lives, all the result of research and development for the space program. The path to space has never been easy, and it never will be. Together with the aerospace industry, Florida has a proud history of not only hosting our nation's space activities, but also investing in infrastructure to make space exploration possible. We've done this more than any other state, and there's no reason to think we will stop, and we won't. We've invested in launch pads, processing facilities, assembly buildings, laboratories, control rooms, and hangars that have saved the federal government hundreds of millions of dollars. We are a people trying not only to solve the challenges of the present, but we are also dedicating ourselves to helping build the foundation for a brighter future. We hope that the decisions and commitments that follow your report to the White House provide Florida a major opportunity to significantly contribute to the nation's space future. These are critical times for Florida and our space sector. The challenges we face, including the NASA transition and funding issues that you just mentioned, the emergence of commercial space, and heightened interest by our own DoD in space, are significant. Despite the very challenging global fiscal environment, we have taken a long-term view, and decisive actions will serve both Florida and our nation's future. As your committee on the future of U.S. spaceflight has gathered input across the nation over the past few weeks, consistent themes have emerged. I'm here to address 4 this morning: the gap, ISS impacts, heavy lift vehicle, and commercial space initiatives. Many have testified before your committee on the negative impact the gap in U.S. human spaceflight will have on national and economic security, the full utilization of the taxpayer-funded $100 billion space station, the dispersion of of our workforce, the best workforce in the world in U.S. human spaceflight, the global image of the U.S. human spaceflight program as a symbol of peaceful international cooperative research, and the motivation that human spaceflight provides for our children to study math and science. Now, I'm not going to repeat everything that you've heard in each one of these areas, other than just to say that the extended gap from the perspective of the state of Florida is unacceptable. We think not just for our state, but for our nation. And if there is any option that can bridge that gap, the state of Florida implores you to give it the strongest consideration. Due to the impending gap, Florida is bracing for a hardship, the magnitude of which this state has not seen in decades. NASA's current plan to retire the space shuttle by the end of 2010 and pursue the current constellation projects of record are not expected, as you know, to provide human spaceflight capability to replace the shuttle until 2016. We are anticipating the loss of up to 7,000 direct jobs at the Cape and upwards to 20,000 more with indirect impacts throughout the state of Florida, far more than any other state. But the raw numbers of planned job cutbacks at Kennedy Space Center do not tell the whole story. As you know, the Kennedy Space Center processes and launches our nation's space shuttle fleet, and KSC is an operational facility. Thus, the gap between the current and future programs will impact the KSC community differently than any other NASA centers and communities. More than half of Florida's thousands of human spaceflight workers are highly skilled engineers and technicians. This workforce represents the enormous, unique engineering and technical skill sets that provide the core capability to sustain the nation's future human spaceflight program, and which may scatter to other unrelated industries if the gap is not addressed. While I know that you understand the critical skill sets will be lost, skills that will be needed after the gap that cannot be easily or readily replaced, it will take an enormous funding and a Herculean effort to rebuild the capability of these skilled workers if they go away. It does not serve the nation well to be constrained by the 2010 completion of the current manifest. Allowing a continuation of shuttle flights into the currently defined period of the gap introduces a prudent element of risk management to the program. It is a very prudent way to try and ensure that we maintain and keep intact this incredible workforce that we have. Now, albeit there is a cost for this longer period of shuttle flight, it reduces the overall risk to the nation's human spaceflight program, however, reduces the dependence on Russia for support of the International Space Station, and gives additional time for commercial companies to take up their role of supporting low Earth orbit. Simply stated, failure to address the gap in human spaceflight operations will temporarily demolish the nation's space program, decimate a significant portion of Florida's workforce, and send a devastating and statewide economic shockwave through an already struggling economy. The gap directly relates to the second issue, ensuring maximum utilization and return to the nation from the International Space Station. The ISS is a platform for scientific discovery, many of which we can only dream about today. It recognizes both the $100 billion plus financial commitment that the taxpayers of this country have made, as well as our obligation to our international partners. Consistent with statements by senior Obama administration officials, broad consensus appears to be developing around the International Space Station serving a real, ongoing role as a platform for scientific discovery. Florida remains fully supportive of this objective and supports extension of ISS operations to span at a minimum to the year 2020. Now that the ISS is designated as a national laboratory, the potential to combine the power of this designation with the Space Life Sciences Lab creates the ground node of a national laboratory complex and holds great promise of discovery for both the government and scientific industry sectors. Most importantly, it will help preserve the experienced workforce so critical to manned flight operations. At a time when U.S. leadership in space, as well as a host of other technology-intensive fields, is under assault from nations around the globe, it seems illogical to put such highly skilled workers who contribute significantly to our nation's global economic and national security position out of work. It very well could mitigate the possibility of the Constellation schedule slipping further to the right by keeping open the option of utilizing a shuttle-derived propulsion system to provide the next generation of heavy lift capability, in lieu of development of a new heavy lift rocket. Further, it mitigates risk around both human and cargo access to the ISS by preserving a baseline level of proven capability that is 100% built and operated in the United States. And this brings me to my third point. There is consensus regarding the potential of the commercial space sector serving an increasingly important role to provide U.S. access to the ISS. NASA is investing commercial entrepreneurial service to the ISS by financially assisting in companies' build-out of their commercial cargo and crew vehicles to service the International Space Station. Those companies expect to have their cargo vehicles ready for station support in 2012 or 2013, with their crew escape capsule ready in 2013. The state of Florida supports NASA's current plans for commercialization of station resupply. As you know, one of the contractors selected by NASA to fill this role, SpaceX, will launch its ISS resupply missions from the Cape. And the state of Florida has invested several $1 million in assisting SpaceX in preparing Launch Complex 40 for operation. The success of SpaceX, Orbital Science, and other commercial companies is crucial for providing cost-effective options for reaching low Earth orbit, and will have the potential to evolve future capabilities to help preserve America's leadership in space. My fourth point has to do with the nation's future exploration program and the alternatives you may present to the White House. Preservation of U.S. heavy lift capability is probably one of the most difficult issues the committee will consider. In Florida's view, preservation of this capability is imperative, both for future manned exploration missions to the Moon, Mars, or other deep space objectives, as well as to appropriately manage risk around future human and cargo access to the International Space Station. Whatever vehicle you may choose for the nation's heavy lift capability, a commitment to heavy lift and a commitment to a robust lunar exploration program are good for the nation and good for Florida. Return to the Moon is not trivial just because we've done it before. True exploration on the Moon for extended periods of time will stretch the nation's technology goals, as will finding ways to develop technologies for supporting human operation in long-duration lunar missions. A commitment to a heavy lift concept that will provide long-term exploration potential and robust ability to go beyond low Earth orbit will meet the goal of retaining America's leadership in space and greatly assist in bringing the benefits of space technology advances back to mankind here on Earth. Our country must remain the leader in human spaceflight launches and in military, commercial, and civil operations and exploration in space. And for our nation to succeed in this endeavor, we urge you to seriously consider every option that will enable you to do so. That also will be good for the great state of Florida. There are many reasons to maintain our nation's space leadership from Florida. Our geography, our aerospace workforce, which is second to none in the world, the billions of dollars worth of facilities and infrastructure at the Cape, safety processes, our launch complexes, runways, and assembly facilities, just to name a few. As you consider the future heavy lift, Florida urges the committee to give strong consideration to options that will close the shuttle to Constellation gap, both from the left and the right side of the schedules. We are different from other states because we have the only U.S.-based heavy lift launch capacity or capability, which, if America is going to maintain its competitive advantage and leadership role, must be preserved for future development. We pledge to support you with bipartisan, public and private partnerships at multiple levels: the governor, our administration, the Florida legislature, statewide bipartisan support from our congressional delegation in Washington, along with NASA, KSC, Space Florida, state and local economic development organizations, local chambers of commerce, county commissions, and city councils. The state has truly united in its efforts to demonstrate its strong commitment to support the nation's space goals and the growth of aerospace here in the Sunshine State. So how can NASA leverage Florida's workforce, infrastructure, and other support to advance its exploration agenda? Florida offers the following suggestions. Number one, establish a policy to maximize the use of existing infrastructure, retain strategically skilled workers, and explore new opportunities for state-federal collaboration. Number two, commit to the development or retention of a near-term heavy-lift launch capability that matches or exceeds the capability of the space shuttle. Number three, close the human spaceflight gap from both sides by allowing the continuation of the shuttle program without the constraint of the 2010 deadline and accelerating the development of a next-generation launch system. Number four, accelerate and maximize the use of commercial launch services for space station cargo and crew transport. Number five, establish KSC and the state-developed Space Life Sciences Lab as an official part of the International Space Station's National Laboratory that will remain in operation at a minimum to 2020. And number six, expand Kennedy Space Center's value-added role in appropriate areas, including early involvement in the design and testing of next-generation launch vehicles, a greater role in applied R&D for space transportation technologies, and lunar Mars-based systems, and responsibility for logistics and supply chain management for NASA's exploration efforts. Kennedy Space Center is NASA's center of excellence for launch, and the governor and I are convinced that Florida must remain a significant center of gravity for this new era in the aerospace industry as well. We sincerely believe, with your support, we can maintain that role for our nation's future as well. Mr. Chairman, I again just want to close by thanking you and each member of this committee for your service. This is critically important for the future, not just of aerospace, but for the future of this state and this country, and we're all deeply grateful for your service. Thank you.
Well, Lieutenant Governor, thank you. Thank you very much, Lieutenant Governor, for sharing those thoughts. And if you would not mind giving us a copy of the presentation, actually, we'd like to incorporate that in our file. Thank you. We also had a request by Senator Nelson that we play a pre-recorded tape. He met with us at our meeting in Washington and spoke to us in person, but he has a tape that he has asked that we play. And so let's do that at this time.
I appreciate this opportunity to visit with you by means of this video since the Senate is in session the day that you're having the hearing in Brevard County. And thank you for moving around the country, and thank you for going to the Kennedy Space Center. It's very important to our people, because, as I said in the first time that I visited with you in your first meeting in Washington, what you come out and recommend in this commission is going to be especially important, because I think it's going to give the weight, your report, the weight for the President to make the decision, because you all have the credentials. And so I'd like to iterate a couple of other things. First of all, we've just had the 40th anniversary celebrations of Apollo 11. And on that occasion, I, with others, was able to pass the Congressional Gold Medal for not only the Apollo 11 astronauts, but also John Glenn, hearkening back to the recognition that their accomplishments as part of the NASA team were extraordinary and symbolic for the pressing forward of this nation technologically. Although it was a different time and we were in the great space race with our mortal enemy, the Soviet Union, nevertheless, that technological achievement and having the resources and the will put together to accomplish that, starting with Alan Shepard, Gus Grissom, and then John Glenn's orbit, 3 orbits, and then on to the Apollo program. It produced a generation of math and science, a generation of engineers, of kids being so excited about the space program that they wanted to go into those fields. And that gave us the competitive edge for generations to come in a global economy. And of course, it produced extraordinary spin-offs that have improved our daily lives here on planet Earth. Now, why do I say all of this? I say it because it's important to keep that magic going. It's important for you to come out with the recommendations that does not starve NASA to death like it's been in the last decade, that does not give the emphasis to NASA that brings us to the situation, a deplorable situation, as we are now, where when we complete the space station, that the shuttle is going to be shut down and it's going to be a 4 or 5 or 6 year gap before we have another human-rated vehicle that can take our own astronauts to our own space station that we have spent $100 billion for and been the major reason that it has been constructed with our international partners. Don't make that mistake again. And I think you have within your hands the credentials to start turning this around, because I think if you give a strong report, it is going to cause the Obama administration to think long and hard before they would have lean out years as they have proposed in this last budget. On the other hand, if you propose budgets that will accomplish a great space program, it's going to enable people like me to be able to have a prayer session with the new administration to point out to them the advantages of the space program. Now, first of all, you clearly ought to get rid of the notion that I don't think anybody's taking seriously, that we're going to get rid of the space station in 2015. If we have built this station with our international partners and spent upwards of $100 billion on it, and are just getting some of the main scientific instruments to it, as we will with the AMS, why in the world would we budget for shutting it down in 2015? Second, you need to definitely consider the fact that there will be potentially massive layoffs because of this ill-considered set of budgets that have occurred over the last decade that leave us to where we will not have a human-rated vehicle that is in time for the space shuttle to be shut down. And therefore, we have to rely on the Russians to get us to our own space station, barring some commercial venture such as SpaceX of being able to produce its vehicle for cargo and hopefully at a later date also for human-rated. So you've got to address that fact of layoffs that take away the corporate memory, the extraordinary wealth of information and experience in the launch teams and the design teams and so forth. And then as you look to the future, understand that we should not only fulfill President Obama's goal of being on the moon by 2020, but what is the real goal? The real goal is to send a human mission to Mars and to explore that planet and to continue to press the boundaries of the frontiers so that we understand this universe in which we are a part. Now, it's my understanding that you are going to come out with two options within the President's budget and two options outside of the budget. I understand and I commend the Chairman, Norm Augustine, for having said that you're not going to be constrained to stay within the President's budget. I thank you for that. And the initial instructions that you received that you had to stay within the budget, I think were extremely ill-considered, and I don't think reflect the President's thinking. I think this President understands, almost in the mindset of President Kennedy, what this nation's space program can do for us as a people and for us as a people of humans on planet Earth. And so I implore you to let your creativity come up with a recommendation of what you think is best for our American space program joining our international partners. And finally, I would say, as you know, I have the commitment from the administration that if we cannot get this next set of space shuttle flights off in time by the end of fiscal year 2010 or by the end of calendar year 2010, that they in fact commit to flying out all of these space shuttle flights to complete the station and to equip it. There have been various figures about what it would cost. I put in the budget that we passed for 2011 an additional $2.5 billion. Some think that you could continue to fly the shuttle each year for an additional $1.7 billion. Whatever it is, I wish you would consider extending the shuttle to a point in time that would lessen the gap so that we could have Americans riding American vehicles to get to our station, and then on to the moon, and then on to Mars. Thank you for letting me share these thoughts with you, and thank you for your public service.
We also have a statement from Senator Martinez, which is pre-recorded, and we'll listen to that now.
Hello, it's good to have an opportunity to appear before your commission and offer some thoughts about our nation's space program. Our nation's space program is at a crossroads. For the first time in generations, we're facing the real possibility of not having the means to send a man into space until we transition into the next phase of our space program. As a senator from Florida and a longtime Floridian, I feel a special pride in the work that is done at the Kennedy Space Center, and I strongly support increasing any opportunities for human space flight. I'd like to offer just a few recommendations to consider as you continue your study. Just as the Obama administration has suggested, the remaining space shuttle flights should be completed without setting hard time limits to avoid mistakes that could result from pressure to launch. At the same time, I do not believe that the shuttle program should be extended beyond the current manifest. While such an extension could help to limit job losses in the short term, I am concerned that it could further delay progress on development of our next heavy lift launch vehicle. This could have a devastating long-term impact on the space program and our nation's space program. Instead, I believe that we need to expedite the development of our next man-heavy launch vehicle to mitigate these job losses and retain as many of these talented workers as is possible. With regard to the decision on the proper launch vehicle architecture, I am not an aerospace engineer, so I will leave the physics and engineering debates to those that are far more qualified. On the other hand, as a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, I have seen firsthand the cost and delays of major weapon systems brought on by constantly shifting requirements. The Constellation Systems program was studied and chosen after careful review. And while no administration should have its decisions dictated to it by its predecessor, I believe that changing requirements and moving to a different architecture at this point would only increase the cost and likely delay the successful launch of our next heavy lift launch vehicle. I support the current mission of returning to the moon, a manned mission to Mars, and the exploration of other near-Earth objects. This vision of exploration has been endorsed by Congress twice, once by a Republican-controlled Congress, and again 3 years later by a Democrat-controlled Congress. Unfortunately, this vision has not received the necessary funding from the appropriations committees, nor through the budgets produced by the Bush or Obama administrations. If we collectively support this vision, there is no excuse why we can't fund it. Finally, with regard to NASA's current mission and its allocation of resources, I believe Congress needs to increase its commitment to space exploration and the research and development of new aeronautics technologies within the NASA budget. Each year, NASA is funding a tremendous amount of earth science and life science research. And while these endeavors have merit, we're now facing a 5-year gap in human spaceflight, and we risk losing our place as the world leader in space. The administration ought to consider this fact during future budgets. Our country has a proud tradition in space exploration, and I applaud the work of all the men and women who have dedicated their lives to NASA's mission. The state of Florida strongly supports your work, and we all stand ready to support your leadership into the future. I thank you for the opportunity to offer my testimony before this important commission, and I wish you success as you continue shaping NASA's future. Thank you very much.
We also have a written statement from Congressman Cosmas that will be read by a member of his staff. Please.
This is the statement of Congresswoman Suzanne Cosmas. Mr. Augustine and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts and concerns with you today on behalf of my constituents in the 24th District. And thank you for assuming your daunting challenge. We understand the difficult task this panel faces and how high the stakes are for everyone involved in our space program. A robust human spaceflight program is essential to our nation's future. It drives technology and innovation, fulfills our innate human impulse to explore, and inspires future generations of engineers and scientists. A strong space program is crucial to our national security and our economy, and it is in the best interest of our nation. The issues you are working to address, including the retirement of the shuttle program, the development of the next generation spacecraft, and the continued use of the International Space Station, will have economic impacts on communities across the country. This is especially true for Central Florida. Local studies show the total direct and indirect impact of the looming spaceflight gap could approach 20,000 jobs lost. The professional Space Coast workforce possesses unparalleled skills and dedication. These workers help to ensure our nation remains at the forefront of exploration and discovery. They support a program that is vital to our national security, and they contribute enormously to our national and local economies. This workforce, if lost, will not be easily reassembled for future projects. A 5-year or longer human spaceflight gap is simply unacceptable. Minimizing the human spaceflight gap, ensuring the full utilization of the ISS beyond 2015, and bringing future work related to research, development, and testing to KSC will help to minimize the loss of our unique workforce, ensure our continued commitment to America's leadership in space, and transform how NASA does business. I understand that you are considering presenting options to the President related to the extension of the Space Shuttle program. As launch delays mount, it is becoming increasingly likely that we will need to fly the shuttle past 2010, which is why Senator Nelson and I fought to include shuttle funding for 2011 in the congressional budget. I am pleased that the administration has made a commitment to flying the scheduled missions without a deadline, and I will keep working to ensure that NASA has the funding necessary to maintain jobs and complete its manifest. Dr. Sally Ride's working group has also persuasively outlined the merits of adding additional space shuttle flights. Preserving the highly skilled workforce at KSC and throughout Central Florida is one of my highest priorities, and I would support additional flights as long as we can launch them safely and provide funding levels that do not increase the gap by delaying the next generation of human spaceflight. The International Space Station is a national asset that has bipartisan congressional support. The value of a national laboratory in space should not be underestimated. There is enormous potential for discoveries that will enable us to explore our universe and improve life here on Earth. We have already invested a great deal in the ISS. Extending its use beyond 2015 will ensure that we maximize our investment while helping to retain the specialized Florida workforce through payload preparation at the Space Life Sciences Lab and additional launches at KSC. Under the current plan, much of the effort to support the ISS between the retirement of the shuttle and operation of the next generation spacecraft will be undertaken by the emerging commercial sector. I believe this sector should be fostered in order to maintain access to the ISS, utilize the workforce, and ensure a healthy industrial base that can support future defense and civil programs. Furthermore, the potential for complete reliance on the Russians for crew transport for a price that could amount to billions will mean American taxpayer dollars will be shipped abroad instead of invested at home. This is unacceptable, especially at a time when we are threatened with losing jobs here at home. I urge you to include in your presentation to the President options that will support the rapid development of domestic commercial capabilities. One common responsibility for each of the working groups of this committee is that each is focusing on industrial skill base. Nowhere is that issue more critical than here in Florida. To that end, I urge you consider offering an option that would establish a program office at KSC to manage the supply chain and logistics for the next generation spacecraft. As the final destination of the vast majority of the components and systems purchased by the federal government before departure into space, KSC could lead the way to a more sophisticated procurement mentality, which would reduce operating costs and create a healthier industrial base for NASA, the Department of Defense, and commercial launch activities. I would also like to urge you to include options for new types of work to be located at Kennedy. Kennedy's operations expertise should be applied to the development and testing of the next generation spacecraft and associated hardware. The folks that process, maintain, and launch our vehicles know better than anyone else what elements are necessary to ensure a safe, efficient, and reliable program. Embedding the operations mindset into development processes will not only utilize an experienced workforce and existing infrastructure, but will also result in increased affordability and sustainability. Finally, with regards to funding, I believe that the investment in NASA is one of the best we as a nation can make in our future. The benefits of human spaceflight are numerous and far-reaching. I urge you to provide an honest and adequate assessment with every option you present to the President. We cannot complete our important missions if we continue shuffling funding from one program to another and pitting NASA projects against each other. Since entering office, I have fought at every turn to increase funding for NASA, and I will continue working with my colleagues from both parties to secure the funds necessary to maintain our leadership in space and preserve jobs. How we choose to address the challenges NASA currently faces will have a lasting impact on our standing as the world leader in space, science, and technology. We need innovative and effective solutions to these challenges to ensure a strong human space flight program, to support America's strategic interests, and to protect jobs and revitalize our economy. Thank you again for your dedication to our nation's space program and for affording me the opportunity to share my views of those on the Space Coast. Our community is relying on your expertise to help determine the best path for the future of human spaceflight. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those remarks. And we have one other member of Congress who's requested to make a statement. That's Congressman Posey, and I understand there's a member of the staff that will be here to present that.
Mr. Augustine, members of the committee, welcome to Florida Space Coast. The history of America's ventures in space exploration is intertwined with this region in East Coast Central Florida, and you will not find a more dedicated, accomplished, and hardworking group of people that you will meet here to ensure that the shuttle safely completes its scheduled manifest. Your task is paramount. You have the ability to shape the future of America's human spaceflight program for generations to come. Your charter gives you a rare opportunity to identify and characterize the range of options that spans a reasonable possibilities and continuation of the U.S. human spaceflight program beyond the retirement of the shuttle. With limited time and resources at your disposal, and to be a practical use for policymakers, your report cannot help but convey that some courses of action may be far more promising than others for the United States to maintain its leadership in space. By virtue of your expertise, you, the members of this committee, will appreciate the thousands of benefits and spin-offs derived from America's efforts in space exploration. However, the overwhelming abundance of NASA spin-offs, cell phones, laptops, GPS, to name a few, have meant that many Americans take for granted or fail to realize altogether how space exploration directly affects their lives and benefits them. Your review, upon which major decisions are expected to be based, has the potential to determine whether cutting-edge technology of the future is pioneered by the United States or by a foreign power. As we know, the international competition is real and it is fierce. Importantly, we all realize the vital implications at stake in regards to our national security. Whoever dominates space will control the security of the Earth. Our international competitors are already nipping at our heels. Russia, China, India, and others are challenging our position as a world leader in space. Who would have thought that what the Wright brothers began more than 100 years ago would have led the United States to world preeminence in aerospace, and that it would be our nation's leading export. We should not and cannot afford to surrender this leadership to others. We must press the envelope and lead the world, not for the sake of national pride, but because it's an integral part of our future and will inspire future generations of Americans. Remember that what the Wright brothers accomplished was more than just set our nation to flight. They inspired a generation, and that generation inspired the next. President Kennedy, like the Wright brothers, inspired a generation with his vision of landing a man on the moon and bringing him safely to Earth. As a young man, I was inspired by that vision and joined thousands of other Americans to work on the Apollo program to see that vision fulfilled. We did it 40 years ago, almost to the day. We succeeded. But in the wake of that victory, tens of thousands of us received our pink slips. As we approached the space gap and our dependency on the Russians to access the space station, we must carefully not repeat the mistakes of the past. Our talented workforce cannot simply be laid off and then rehired a few years later. I speak from personal experience. I watched the exodus from this very community as our nation's space team had no option but to move away. Regardless of the path decided, the transition is unlikely to be seamless in regards to the thousands of men and women on the Space Coast who have the skill set to assure American access to space. To that end, I believe it is critical that your report highlight options to minimize, as much as possible, the gap with the shuttle successor program, presumably a Constellation, in the interest of maintaining our skilled human spaceflight workforce. While directed to undertake your study within the current profile NASA exploration activities, I encourage you to note that this consideration falls after the greater priorities of 1, expediting a new U.S. capability to support utilization of the International Space Station, 2, supporting the missions of the Moon and other destinations beyond low Earth orbit, and 3, stimulating commercial spaceflight capabilities. As a legislator, I remind you that budgets are subject to change, often arbitrary, but good public policy calls for their alignment with public priorities. Space exploration is the one thing for which the United States is undeniably, unequivocally, and universally respected around the world. If we as a nation are serious about maintaining our leadership in space and wish to continue to be the beneficiaries of space exploration, then policy decisions will depend on your judgment and accentuate the possibilities that best fit our nation overall, notwithstanding hypothetical budgets of the future. Budgets are a reality, but proper leadership can and should match the mission, not the mission to the budget. I and many of my colleagues in Congress look forward to reviewing your report and to see within the range of options some that call for additional funding if current budgetary trends are insufficient to accomplish our space objectives as a nation. This commission should fully explore options beyond limiting restraints of an arbitrary budget number that has been placed upon NASA. Our nation's NASA budget is $18.8 billion out of a $3.6 trillion budget. This accounts for less than 0.5% of the entire federal budget. Consider in totality all of the benefits that this nation's space program will bring to the next generation. What is the vision of today's youth? I would say to you, the members of this commission, you will play a large role in answering that question. Consider what vision you lay out for the next generation of Americans. Let's look forward. Let's do what's right. The leaders of tomorrow want to be inspired. Please don't let them down. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for that statement. Before we break, I'd like to just reiterate 2 open items, action items, with regard to the presentations that we heard earlier, so that we can close them out at the meeting next week. One is to really nail down this question of risk and propellant transfer. And I know you've gone into that in some detail, but our recommendations, it sounds like, might well hinge on some of our options might well hinge on the ability to do that safely and effectively. Second, we need to know how we are going to propose to resolve this cosmic ray question that is open and of great consequence. How we're going to deal with the question of the cosmic ray issue. With that, there are two administrative items. One is that, as I mentioned earlier, there are sign-up sheets located at the registration desk for those who would care to make comments during the public period. We'd ask that you limit those to no more than 3 minutes. And there, unfortunately, will be a limited number of folks we can hear just due to time, so it'll be first come, first served. Secondly, a very important announcement, the hotel says that it has an $8 soup and salad buffet for the public. Once again, first come, first served. With that, we will adjourn until 1:15. Thank you.